Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Trans-Siberian Orchestra rocks Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. on December 23rd. I spoke to drummer Jeff Plate about the band's biggest hits, from the guitar-shredding Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224 to the melodic Christmas Canon. Jeff Plate, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Hey, Jason, thanks for having me.
Now, we're here because, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra is celebrating the 25th anniversary of their multi-platinum release, Christmas Eve and Other Stories, and you'll be bringing your tour to our area in Washington, D.C. at Capital One Arena on Thursday, December 23rd. Gosh, can you believe it's been 25 years?
No, honestly, no. I can remember some moments in the studio when we were first recording this record. I remember some moments when we first recorded Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224, the previous year with the band Sabotage. And little did we know at that time that our lives would be forever changed. Paul O'Neill's vision, his words, his music, his story, everything just came together in that first CD. And here we are 25 years later, still celebrating that. Touring, this will be our 22nd year of touring, which is unbelievable. But everything, aside from last year, everything has just been fantastic. So we can't wait to get back out there.
Wow, yeah. When people come out to the show, what all songs? Remind them what some of the the famous holiday tunes that they're going to hear.
Well, I just mentioned Christmas Eve, Sarajevo 1224. We will play the first CD in its entirety. So, Angel Came Down, Angel Returned, Oh Holy Night, Mad Russian's Christmas, First Snow, Ornament, Old City Bar, This Christmas Day, Prince of Peace. It's, the whole thing in its entirety is just magic. And when we first started touring in 1999, this was the first story that we toured with for the first 12 years. And it is, in my opinion, aside from the music and the lyrics and, the spectacle of the show, it really is that story that just connected with so many people, kept bringing them back year after year, kept bringing more people with them year after year. And we went from playing theaters in 1999 to within 5 years playing arenas, to soon after that playing arenas twice a day, which, in the case of our Washington D.C. stop this year on December 23rd, we will be doing 2 shows. And it's just amazing what this thing has grown into. It's Paul's vision was something, none of us quite understood it at first. But once the whole thing really came together and started moving along, then we all got the big picture, and it was like, you know what, hang on, because here we go. And here we are 25 years later. It's just been wonderful.
Oh yeah. So you keep mentioning Paul O'Neill. I mean, obviously the genius behind this. How exactly did the band form? What was it, like in 96, I think?
So it's an interesting story. Paul O'Neill began producing and writing with a band called Sabotage back in 1986. He began working with John and Chris Oliva in that band on the album Hall of the Mountain King. And from there, these three became quite the team. And Paul's lyrics and his vision, his ability to wrap a concept around, their next records, really kind of set them apart and gave them an identity. If you look back at some of the Sabotage records in the late 80s, I mean, even in the 90s, Gutter Ballet, Streets, Edge of Thorns, Handful of Rain, you can hear the hints of TSO in some of the songs on these records. Paul was taking the band from just a heavy metal band into something more progressive, more melodic, more orchestration, more, there was more theater and emotion in the songs that they were writing with Paul. So, and then even still, if you look back at some of the videos that the band did, Gutter Ballet, When the Crowds Are Gone, for example, I mean, that looks like TSO. So Paul was thinking of this in the late 80s, probably earlier than that. When I joined Sabotage, it was in 1994. The band had gone through some tragedy. Chris Oliva had the original guitar player had died in a car accident. The original drummer left, which is how I came in. The original singer, John Oliva, had stepped down. They had a new lead singer. So the band was really, really in chaos. But things settled down. The first studio record that I did with Sabotage was called Dead Winter Dead. And here again, this was a concept by Paul about the war going on in Yugoslavia at the time. And he had this idea of inserting this instrumental Christmas song in this album. And there was a gentleman. This is a true story. There was a man in Belgrade who would sit in the middle of all this rubble and play his cello. And Paul was just kind of fascinated by this whole thing. So Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224 was born at this time, and it made it onto the Sabotage record. When that song was first released, it literally just took off in a completely different direction, became this hit song across all the radio formats, all across the country. And it was something different from Sabotage, but it was something that gave Paul the opportunity to create this band he'd been dreaming of, and that was the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. So myself and the other members of Sabotage, we were just so fortunate to be involved in this, from the very first song. So we kind of graduated from Sabotage into TSO. We became the band. We filled in, I should say, Paul and the management team filled in the vocalist and some of the other instrumentalists around the core group of guys. And the rest is history. We recorded that first album back in 1996. We already knew that Christmas Eve Sarajevo was a hit. But when that first album came out, the album became a hit. All of a sudden there's something really magical going on. We recorded the Christmas Attic, then we ventured off into Non-Holiday with Beethoven's Last Night, and things just built from there. But not until that we started touring in 1999 did Trans-Siberian Orchestra really, really begin to build and just start growing this audience that is still growing today. We play close to 1 million people a year in these tours. We've sold, millions of records. It's just been unbelievable what we've been able to do. But this all started with Paul O'Neill's vision way back in the 80s. And like I said, here we are today.
Wow, yeah, it's wild. It was this vision for this rock opera, Dead Winter Dead, that featured this Christmas song that just blew up and took on a life of its own. I'm gonna drill down into Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224 a little more. Musically, I know it features several other reworkings of other famous carols that we know. I mean, I feel like there's a little bit of a God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, maybe even some Carol of the Bells, I think, in there. But I guess I can't use the soundbite if I say it. So why don't you tell me? Hey, what all riffs of famous tunes are within that song?
Well, those are the two main ones, and I think that really covers it. There is a little bit of original instrumentation in there, but Paul had the idea for this song. The idea for this song didn't just come up for the Dead Winter Dead record. I think Paul had something in his mind for years before that. And his writing team, John Oliva and Bob Kinkle, the three of them put this thing together, but Paul produced it. And, trust me, at the time when we first recorded this song, none of us really knew what Paul was thinking. We thought this was quite the bold move to put this song on a Sabotage record. But once we heard the final version, it was like, wow, that really sounds great. And, it was something at the time, everybody has done Christmas songs over the years. A lot of artists have done Christmas songs, and, we've heard them 100 times, 1,000 times. And most of them are all fairly nice. But when this song came out with this beautiful intro, you got the guitar, you got the cello, and all of a sudden, bam, the guitar and the drums hit you. It's like, wow, where did that come from? And all of a sudden, this whole, I think this whole clique of people who have been looking for something different finally found it. And the song just kind of took the airwaves by storm. So the instrumentation was something that, I was basically just following along, to be completely honest with you. Because here again, like I said, I can speak for myself. I didn't really understand what Paul was thinking, but it's like, sure. but him and his team, Bob Kinkle and John Oliva, they came up with this thing, and man, here we are today, and that song is timeless.
Oh yeah, I love how you were saying it sort of starts, with that, it starts kind of slow and then bam, it hits you. And then talk about how it sort of, by the end, it sort of just crescendos into the most, we don't usually use the word kick-ass Christmas carol, but it really is. That electric guitar it's just epic the way you finish.
I think the way you just described it is why it became so popular. Al Pitrelli is our guitarist. He's a musical director for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and Paul wanted him to just he wanted him to just burn at the end of that song, and he did. And like you said, it was something that just, man, it grabs you. It is not like any other holiday song, nor is this band like any other band for that matter, or are these holiday CDs that we've recorded over the years like anybody else. But Paul's idea was the song needed to be intense. It is beautiful. It is magic. It's also tragic, and when you put it in the context of the story that he wrote around this. But to think that, the way they arranged this with the beautiful intro, and like I said, the guitar and the bass, or the guitar and the drums come in, along with the bass guitar, obviously, all the instrumentation, but towards the end of the song, when that guitar is just flying, then it all comes to a crescendo and pulls back again. And you've got this beautiful guitar that fades out. And, this was Paul was seeing his story as he was creating this song, as he did with all the songs that he wrote. So this was the emotion and the dire situation of this story and this war and what was going on over there at that time was something Paul was very, very concerned with. And he brought all that emotion out in that song. And hey, sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle and you don't really understand where it comes from, but timing is everything. And this song came out at the right time. It just hit in a certain way, and the rest is history. So here we are 25 years later after recording that first CD, and it's still growing every year.
It is a masterpiece. It's an all-time lightning in a bottle thing. Every year, you'll still hear it played every year on the radio around Christmas. It's incredible. Well, you could say the same for Christmas Canon. Off the big hit off of the next album, 1998. It's called The Christmas Attic. So when you guys take me into the creation of Christmas Canon, I know it's sort of a reworking of the canon in D major, but why do you think that one worked so well? With the children's choir and everything.
Well, just because it's beautiful. I mean, it's just a great arrangement. The vocal arrangement is fantastic. It's another one of those traditional holiday songs that it kind of puts you at peace. It's just a really cool melody. It just rolls along. Several years later, we re-recorded the song it's called Christmas Canon Rock. So this really became probably the more popular version. It was more rock and roll. It's the version that we play live. But that song in particular, I mean, you compare that to Christmas Eve Sarajevo, two different things, But here again, the same thing. It's coming from the same place, but it just covered that variety of emotion and music and sound that Paul wanted to cover with this band. And yeah, I mean, you add Wizards in Winter on top of that, another high energy up tempo song that just grabs you. So it's all very, very well done. I mean, these guys came up with a formula that was so unique and so original. And that is really, adds to the popularity of this. People are always looking to find that new thing, this new exciting thing, something they can basically call their own. A lot of people are very proud of the fact that they were some of the first ones to get into TSO and see us live and come see us every year. They hang their head on that, but they knew something was going on with this too. And I mean, I've sat in the middle of this from the very beginning. I've played every show that TSO has done that I've been physically able to do. And it's just amazing what has grown, in front of me and above me and left to right behind me. It's incredible. But just to see the faces and how engaged these people are and how much joy they get out of seeing the show is truly why we do it. Last year was sad sitting home, but I tell you what, man, this year we cannot wait to get back on stage and do what we do.
For sure. And do you think part of the genius of it too is do you think the staying power is intrinsically tied to the fact that there is this annual, we celebrate Christmas every year. Another band might have a hit song, and then years later you're like, that song is so 2 years ago. But with Christmas Eve in Sarajevo, or Christmas Canon Rock, they become they become like eternal. They become, Nat King Cole, singing Chestnuts Roasting on Open Fire. Those songs don't become dated because it's an annual part of our annual rhythm as we play these songs. Do you think that's part of the reason that you guys have had staying power, is just you're intrinsically tied to something we're going to celebrate every year?
Sure. I mean, if you've never heard TSO before, you're going to come to our concert and you're going to recognize music. I mean, there's traditional holiday themes woven in and out of all these songs. So you're connected. You're connected to something. I think Christmas Eve and Other Stories was just magic in so many ways, but I really believe that the story that Paul wrote around this CD is really what connected with so many people. The story is really just about the goodness of man. It's a simple concept, but Paul wrote this beautiful story that goes along with this. Once people realized what the Trans-Siberian Orchestra was, because granted, I know some people showed up to our shows thinking they were going to see an orchestra. And yes, they saw an orchestra, but not in the normal sense. But I think once people realized what a family-friendly show this was, and the meaning behind the songs in the story, where they started bringing more family members, this became part of their Christmas get-together. There's a lot of people that this is what they do with their family at Christmas, instead of the traditional, let's get together and, watch football or something like that. Let's go see TSO. Let's get the family. Let's go see TSO. Let's escape for 2.5 hours and see a great show. And this was really, this was by design. When we first started touring, we realized immediately this audience isn't just the Sabotage audience. This is everybody. You've got kids, you've got grandparents, you've got all different walks of life out there. And we needed to, without being pretentious, the music is what it was. Paul was writing music that he just believed in. He wasn't trying to necessarily please anybody in particular, but he was onto something and he stuck to his guns. But when we came, into doing these tours, keeping the volume at a friendly level, keeping things where everybody could follow along, where nobody was going to be offended, where nobody wanted to get up and leave. And once we kind of figured out some of these wrinkles, people come to the show, they're in their seat from beginning to end. And it's just great to see this every year. I pinch myself, man. Every time I'm on stage, I look around that arena. It's like that seat up in the top row in the back of the arena is full. That row of people up there, it's just incredible. But the story, I believe, along with the other stories that Paul wrote, this is what people really connected with, and this snowballed from there.
Snowball, pun intended, I guess.
Hey,
Well, outside of the snowball stuff, let's say some of our listeners love, the Christmas music, and they get turned on to the band because of that. What other non-Christmas stuff that you're very proud of yourself? Is there anything from, Beethoven's Last Night or Night Castle or Dreams of Fireflies or any of that stuff? Is there anything that you would say, hey, if you're a fan of the Christmas music and you want to explore a little bit more what TSO is about, what's like the first thing you recommend of your non-holiday stuff?
well, I would say the entire Beethoven's Last Night CD. That's brilliant. I mean, here again, Paul struck gold with that first Christmas Eve and Other story, but the Beethoven's Last Night story, the characters, the lyrics, the instrumentation, that CD is awesome. And I don't just say that because I performed on it and I'm in the band. It is really, really good. You've got Mozart Figaro, you got Beethoven's Ninth, you've got Requiem, Last Illusion, which is Flight of the Bumblebees. Some of that stuff here again, you listen to it and you know it without even knowing the song. You've heard this music before. And that was all part of the formula, just weaving some of this classical music in and out of these original pieces along with Paul's stories. And, but besides that, Night Castle's another brilliant record. Letters from the Labyrinth, that was the last non-music or non-holiday CD that we released. And, there's a couple songs off that. Madness of Men, I love playing that song live. It's metal, it's up tempo, it's energy, it is just awesome. But there is so much, in all of these records that, there's something there for everybody. If you are a fan of classical music or blues or rock or metal, there's something there for everybody. And this, here again, was an idea that Paul had and stuck with. If there's anything I learned from Paul over the years was just that. You come up with something and you believe in it, and you got to push it to the limit. You got to take it as far as you can. And that's exactly what Paul did. We never would have achieved any success without Paul. Obviously, he created Trans-Siberian Orchestra as we know it. But the live event, the live shows, is where Paul kept investing and kept pushing the envelope and kept making this show something that, whether you were coming to see the holiday part of the show or not, you were going to see a spectacular show. And he wanted to make it one of those shows that people just told their friend, you've got to come see this. You've got to come see it. I tell people all the time, come see us. It is one of the most spectacular, unique shows that you will ever see. You'll never see anything like this with the amount of talent that's on the stage, the amount of production, the talent behind the production, the people putting this on and running all this too. I mean, they're just as important to all this as anybody. But all of it together, there's a million moving parts, and if you've seen us, you know what I mean. There's a lot of stuff going on, but we have rehearsed this and worked this, into a flawless show, and that's why people come back every year.
Oh yeah, it's great to see you guys still flourishing and keeping it going. I mean, 2017 alone was a terrible, really hard year for you guys. I mean, we've mentioned Paul O'Neill a million times in this interview, the brainchild here, but he sadly passed away and in his early 60s, 61 or something. And then I guess later that year, the bassist for TSO, David Z, died in a auto accident. What was it, like a tractor trailer accident? How did the band, how obviously devastating was that, and how were you guys able to sort of pick yourself back up and regroup?
With David Z, he was just such a great guy, a great performer, a fan favorite, honestly one of the best musicians I've ever worked with. Taken too young. I mean, you don't want to see anybody leave in that manner, but he was just too young. It's sad. Trans-Siberian Orchestra, I've been working with Paul since 1994. TSO has been in existence since 1996. We are a family, and this is, when you're in a family, this is the kind of stuff you go through. You lose people and you go through tragedy. Paul, for years, and he said this hundreds of times, TSO is going to outlive us all. TSO is going to be passed on from generation to generation. This is going to be from father to children, from parent to children, to their children, to their children. It is going to carry on forever. It's going to be here longer than all of us. And as TSO got bigger, I began to believe that and realize that he was absolutely right. But to think that we would be doing this without him was not in the cards. None of us saw this coming. None of us expected this. But to the man's credit, what he set out to accomplish, he succeeded. TSO has continued without Paul, although he's always there with us. We do everything in regards to what would Paul do. Keeping the integrity of the show, keeping the integrity of the people that, are in this project, the spirit of it, the good meaning behind it, giving to charity, all of these things that Paul brought to this is what we will continue doing. But he truly created something that is going to be timeless. And I mean, if Christmas Eve, Sarajevo 1224 is any indication of the staying power of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, just based on one song. We just talked about the other music, the catalog of music that we have. this thing is never going to go away. And I think the live part of Trans-Siberian Orchestra is going to be passed down for years and years and years. And you've really got to tip your hat to someone who's been able to do that. It's one thing to think of it, it's one thing to talk about it, but to actually go for it and do it and make it happen, I give him all the credit in the world. But I speak for myself and everybody involved. We're just so proud and feel so lucky that we're a part of this and still a part of this, and we're going to continue to carry on his legacy.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to see the show. Again, everyone, it is at Capital One Arena on December 23rd. So go see that on the 23rd on Festivus, and then you can celebrate Christmas Eve the next day and Christmas Day after that. It's perfect. Again, it's the 25th anniversary of the Christmas Eve and Other Stories album. Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it.
You bet it, man. Take care. Happy holidays. We'll see you soon.
Yes. Happy holidays. Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the D.C. area is great, and Podcast D.C. gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast D.C. is the new local app with hundreds of D.C. area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast D.C.